You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're Kiss!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
Welcome once again to No Time to Turn, a Kiss nerd podcast.
Nerd. Fucking nerds.
So here we are. We're deep into
1975.
And joining me is, as always, Alex Stiff and Cap Nunn.
Hello, guys.
Howdy, howdy.
And we have been tracking and trudging through the history of Kiss thus far. We are now... we just wrapped up, I guess, the Hotter Than Hell album.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. And now we're launching kind of into the tour and the days leading into Dress to Kill. All of this is blurring together rather quickly, if you have not noticed already, because there's not a lot of breathing and downtime for the band here. This
just
is
record, tour.
They're really working at a breakneck pace and trying to break into the consciousness of America, which so far has not been working out so great for them. Of course, we know their fortunes will eventually change, but at this point, they're still a perennial opening act, and in some cases, they are starting to headline in areas where have gained a little bit of traction. So things are just now starting to kind of gain a little momentum. Easy for me to say.
Some kind of a kind of limbo in between, support acts and headlining acts. Like I'm looking at all the support acts that they've had in 1974 leading up to January, and it's everybody from Black Oak, Arkansas to T-Rex to ZZ Top to Wishbone Ash.
That's probably more them opening for those other groups.
Might be right.
I don't think it's them having them open for them. That's, that doesn't make any sense.
I know exactly what you meant.
Right.
And, but Paul actually said, looking at the Hotter Than Hell tour leading up to where we're going to be discussing also a Dress to Kill, Paul states, touring in the early days was both grueling and great. I think we were getting paid $60 a week, but we felt like we were living the dream. We were in a rock band in a rented station wagon, but it was all extremely exciting. We felt we were on a mission and we were on the road to glory. We were a gang of people on a crusade who believed in something and were willing to do anything to promote it. There was a tremendous camaraderie in the band despite our differences, and the people around us shared that passion.
Yeah, they really were, I think, a young, hungry, upstart band trying to, establish what would become what we're talking about now.
And I think that feeds into the material that came in the next album, that excitement.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this tour a little bit now. We've left off, and they're going, again, it's kind of constant touring. So essentially what we're in now is the Hotter Than Hell tour.
Yeah.
The album. The album, do you have the date of when that album shipped? They're going to call it a release date, but I think it's really kind of a ship date or
I would say March. Not March of...
it says here for Hotter Than Hell.
It was October
22nd of 74.
Excuse me.
Yeah, that's correct. So late October.
So now you've got two, the debut album and the follow-up are both in the year 1974. Very relatively close. Very close together. Not relatively. They're very close together. So the band has already got two albums out. They're still touring. And as we talked about last time, a lot of it's concentrated in the Midwest, kind of Great Lakes area.
Midwest and the Southeast a lot, too. Like, they're still coming back to Charlotte and Greenville and Atlanta and places like that, too.
Yeah, so they're trying to hit a lot of these places. They're not getting broke on radio. Their singles aren't necessarily charting. Their albums aren't even really necessarily charting. As I understand it, Hotter Than Hell actually didn't fare as well as the debut album. That is not a good thing.
No.
So they're not even building. They're kind of regressing as far as album sales. but there seems to be a buzz on their live act.
Mm-hmm. And it's crazy to think that just earlier in the year of 74, Kiss was playing that tiny little club in Charlotte, and then on this tour with Black Oak, Arkansas, and James Montgomery, they played Charlotte Coliseum.
Yeah, but that's them opening for Black Oak, Arkansas.
Yeah, and that was November 28th of 74
yeah,
for our Charlotteans here.
There's a couple of shows they did with Black Oak, Arkansas, and they got in trouble with them for some reason. It seemed like the story is their pyro seemed to have caught a curtain on fire or something like this.
I was gonna say, was it that, or was it the blood act, and like they didn't clean up after themselves, and that like pissed off one of the headliners?
That sounds like kind of like iffy to me. That sounds like,
does it?
Yeah, but I mean, my point is that either way, if that's the case, or if the alleged fire was the case, that also sounds that sounds more possible.
Yeah.
But either way, these are incidents that are used to kick the band off the tour.
Any excuse.
Any excuse in lieu of outright saying this group's blowing us off the stage. They don't want to. Who would want to admit that? There's. In hindsight, Ozzy would later acknowledge that was the truth with Black Sabbath, but.
Right.
That doesn't come very often. In the book, Nothing to Lose, which is an excellent Kiss book, they have a lot of quotes from the bands that Kiss opened for or played with in that era. And most of them are pretty positive, and I think, but again, this is all coming from hindsight, and no one wants to admit they were ever wrong about anything.
No, of course
so
not.
you get guys like Kim Simmons from Savoy Brown going, well, they were nothing like us, so we thought they were great. Yeah, but you still probably kicked them off the tour at some point saying, no. Then there's the famous Argent story. Now, I don't know if this is an apocryphal story or not, but it's a fun story, and it's fun to believe, where they're given all kinds of grief about everything from how much staging they can use to how much lighting they can use, et cetera, so on and so forth, to an encore. And Kiss gets called for an encore, and the road manager from Argent says, no.
Because they were only allowed to play, 8 songs?
I don't know, but that's probably part of the deal, too.
Mm-hmm.
And then, famously, if the story is to believe, the Kiss roadies find the Kiss or the Argent road manager and lock him in an equipment trunk. And Kiss all of a sudden find themselves going out for an encore, and then another encore, and then another encore, and not understanding why all of a sudden we getting to do this. It's a great story. Is it true?
I would love for it to be.
I'd love it for it to be true, but there's a part of it where I go,
you print the legend.
Yeah,
you always print the legend.
It's a great story.
I'll defend it on this aspect. You could get away with a lot more shit in the 70s.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So that almost doesn't feel too far off that crew would have done that and not gotten in trouble for it.
Yeah, but it might have hurt them in their prospects with being picked up by someone else. Wait a minute, we heard this.
Yeah.
These guys are trouble. So it might be more, there already were enough trouble going in ahead of it. But I think, the other flip of the coin here is, groups are seeing that Kiss were a benefit to drawing an audience.
Exactly.
And
I'm also noticing, talking about drawing an audience, I'm noticing a whole lot of dates with ZZ Top on this run, too.
Yeah, I don't know who would be opening for who at this point. ZZ Top?
See, 1974, that'd have been post Trace Hombres with LaGrange and all that.
Maybe, yeah, but I don't know where they're at with that, because I know a year before that, ZZ Top were opening for Alice Cooper. So I don't, I would say that's kind of a neck and neck thing. Who knows? I'd have to look and do some research on that. But either way would not surprise me.
Yeah.
There were a lot of groups in the early 70s that broke later on that were kind of like the perennial opening acts in that era. And it would be groups like, Kiss did a lot, but they broke pretty quick. But then you had
Rush, Cheap
Trick, Bob Seger.
Yeah.
Until about the mid 70s, but there in the early 70s, he was opening for everybody. REO Speedwagon, Styx, all these groups that would later become FM Rock Dinosaurs, but in the early 70s, they were all just struggling like anyone else. And, you see them as a perennial opening act. So, I don't think that these kind of campaigns were all that unusual. and certainly wouldn't be unusual for Kiss.
I was kind of scrolling through, not to interrupt you, but another interesting band they opened for, or a band that played with them, the Raspberries.
Yeah. Well, you know, and Paul always professed to be a big Raspberries fan. And I've read different quotes from Eric Carmen from the Raspberries being very, very critical of Kiss and also being very complimentary towards them. So, again, who knows? I would say the criticism was probably closer to the truth at the time, you know, because Kiss was very intimidating. And a lot of people were looking at them strictly as a show band and not hearing the music.
Everybody's like, who is this weird band that nobody knows what to do with?
Yeah. And a lot of people thought the music was a secondary thing. I always say if they did not have strong records, then they would not have survived just on the act alone, because eventually the act wears out. No, no. What proves me wrong is Guar. I've never heard Guar as a musical band ever.
Well, to take a small swipe at them, I think they also might be attributing to the lowest common denominator that constantly goes back to that one.
But that's the same joke being told over and over again repeatedly, and for whatever reason, somebody still finds it funny every time.
Yeah. I think with bands like Guar, that's kind of the shtick to begin with.
Yeah, and it's kind of a mocking of it or whatever. But you know, I think with Kiss, though, they were working. I think they really did care about the music they were putting on the albums, even if, you know, we talked about Hotter Than Hell feeling a little bit like it was scraped together out of odds and ends and a little disjointed, a little disconnected. But they were still, they put a lot of effort into it. We talked about that. You know, you can see that creative impulse coming into how they develop these ideas, even if they're trying to develop them on the fly.
Right.
But as they're coming through this tour now, there's a great quote of Paul Stanley. You just quoted Paul. One of my favorites was, he said, when asked what it was like to be rich and famous, he was like, well,
I know what it's like to be famous.
I know what it's like to be famous, which is great. And a lot of people think that Kiss was, again, they think that Kiss was this very coldly calculated money-making scheme, you know, financed by bankers in the Midwest. Well, no. They were really kind of flying by a lot of trust and a lot of credit. And again, we keep referring
Bill Coyne's credit card.
Bill Coyne's American Express card, which had no credit limit, and he was getting a lot of heat going, you know, are you intending to pay this off? Oh, absolutely.
And, you know it, buddy.
To their credit, Casablanca was also piping a lot of money into this. However, well, we'll get into there's some drama with Casablanca coming out of Dress to Kill we'll get into. But in the meantime, so they're touring. They're still hitting a lot, again, of the Midwest. This is an important area for them to break.
Still, they're hitting it hard. They're hitting it heavy.
And
they go to the West Coast towards January, February of '75.
Yeah. But they're not connecting over there quite as much. There's... is it on this tour that they have the famous footage that exists of them? I think their opening act at Winterland that wound up, you know, it's on the
San Francisco
thing. I think it's credited as 75, but I think it's actually 74.
Yeah, I believe the Winterland show is the Hotter Than Hell tour, because there was no Dress to Kill songs on that yet.
So it's still early, and that's them as an opening act.
And they are just like full of fire
by
on
this
that
point,
show.
You can see, if you look at the difference between some of the footage from, like, again, that exists from early on.
Coventry, even.
The Coventry to the Dick Clark, you know, thing to, you know, there's the, well, it's attributed to Long Beach, but as we've since found out, it's actually filmed at Michigan Palace. But just the way they present themselves just as individuals on stage with, you know, that performance gets more and more, they're more confident, more solid performers, if that makes sense. It's a lot more physical, you know. And so by the time you see what they're doing here, they're not only intimidating just for the theatrics, but just as a sheer force of presence, as an energy, as four guys on stage. I've always contended that you could take away the makeup and the costumes and the theatrics, and they'd still, you know, once they got to that point, they'd still be an intimidating band. You know, I think they still could have been a successful band.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, a large part of what's attracting an audience right now is probably less to do with their records than it did with the live show. I think that attracted that curiosity.
Oh, they blow shit up.
They were starting to do the fire and the smoking guitars and the and everything else. More fire this go around.
Yeah, and they're having to make changes and improvements all the time. But you're still seeing basically similar costuming. They haven't put a lot of emphasis on the costuming and stuff. The costuming is still very
kind of matches the first album, or maybe the first couple of albums.
Yeah, first album didn't really have a signified costume, so to speak.
Well, they were a little more cobbled together with ideas, and now they've probably got someone doing more professional stuff. But of course, I guess it's important to note, or interesting to note, the costume that Gene had with the skull and crossbones was originally on the skull and crossbones was on his chest, and then as the shirt started to disintegrate, he had to turn it around. And it was on his back.
And then eventually they like cut it off and put it on something else.
Yeah, I don't, so they're winging it. They're still winging it. The point is they don't have a lot of money, and they're still putting it together with what they have.
And Lydia was even talking about in those early days, they didn't have because there's different grades of leather that you can get. And they said that they had too good of leather, and it wouldn't dry before the next show. So it would still be reeking and damp and moldy and stuff like that. So you have to imagine, all of us have been in tour buses, vans, RVs with a bunch of stinky other men that have been playing shows back to back to back. Imagine now throwing in those boots and the costumes and all of that. Just, you can't get away from it. It is right there beside you in that car the entire time.
I imagine it was less than pleasant. So, you've got a band that's still, they're in a grind, and they're not really breaking yet. But they can kind of feel the forward momentum. So there's a positive attitude at some point in some way, even though the second album hasn't done as well. But now they've been on the road pretty much nonstop, like we said.
The entire year.
They've come off the road for 2 breaks, one of which was to record Hotter Than Hell.
And honestly, they really only get one more small break right here to record Dress to Kill, and then they hit right back at it, man.
But they're in the studio in February of 75, I believe.
February of 75, recorded in less than a month.
I wouldn't even. I don't think it's even a full month. I've got. Well, I don't have. It seems like their last date they've got on the Hotter Than Hell tour that I've got is somewhere in Indiana on February 22nd, a place called Sheaver. I don't know if I'm even saying that right. Cherville.
Yeah, they had a big break right in between that. It's rather odd. So at the very end of the Hotter Than Hell tour, they had February 1st in Santa Monica. And then they took basically the rest of the month off, which is what I would assume was to record Dress to Kill. I've got in February 20th, they did St. Louis, 21st, Chicago, 22nd, that Shearville, whatever. Yeah.
So it somebody's seems like actually going to sit out there and hear this one and go, God damn it, that's called blah, blah, blah.
Immediately unsubscribe.
And then they don't go back to the road until March 19th, but that's still no time at all. See, I'm thinking that's when they might have recorded the album, would have been somewhere in there.
Yeah, so what I think happened is after that Santa Monica February 1st date, that's when they record. Then they finish off those 3 dates in St. Louis, Chicago, and Chicago. If you're going to mess it up, you might as well just go all the way with it, right? And then, because they said that within 2 weeks of the product being mastered, it was already pressed and released. Yeah. So by the time they walk out, it gets mastered. 2 weeks later, it's on store shelves.
So they're moving in light speed.
So that would just make sense that by the time February wraps up and they start up in March, they're like, oh, that record's coming out? Okay, call the rest of this the Dress to Kill tour.
Well, I don't know that it was formally named at that point.
Yeah.
But
they go all the way back to New York to do it.
They're back in New York. It's interesting that the record company at this point is really really in bad straits.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the exact dates of stuff like this, but somebody somewhere thought it was going to be a great idea to release a double album of Johnny Carson bits from The Tonight Show.
I remember that. I know the story, yes.
And it wasn't a good idea.
And this was a Casablanca thing?
Yeah, and
Yes.
it about bankrupted Casablanca.
To the point where they were like thinking this was going to make them money. Like they were doing this in this is going to save the record company.
This is something that should be a surefire hit, and
Johnny Carson's a big
It's
star.
going to help pull us out of this
it'll
hole.
pull us out of the hole, and now we'll have money, and it didn't. So now there's no money. And there's a famous story of Neil Bogart knowing they're not going to make bankroll, and he borrows money from somewhere of probably dubious origin. And as the whole implication is Casablanca was bankrolled by mafia or mob money.
Yeah.
So to
whether or not
say.
that's true, who knows?
The thoughts and opinion of Russ Ward did not.
No, it's the inference. I'm not saying it's true, but he ends up with like 10 grand, and he goes to Las Vegas and literally gambles the money.
Literally thinking
Jesus.
about it, I
So he
get
could
like
come back.
nervous and anxiety ridden just thinking about doing
Neil
that.
Bogart was a wild character.
Yeah.
And it worked. He came back with enough money to make bankroll for another month or whatever it was, and kept them in the black just enough to keep it rolling.
And the thing is, man, if he went down there and pissed it away, we wouldn't be talking about this
Nobody
band
would be talking
right
about.
here.
There's a lot of things that are going to
That's that
happen.
singular moment scenario.
It's not just a singular moment, though.
Well, that's
There's going to be
one of
one
them.
of the many singular moments in
Yes.
this year where you could see Kiss just go belly up, and we'd be talking about them as if they were, in my
Indie cult
opinion,
band.
yeah, they would be a cult band. But that didn't happen. But what happened was that he had the money, but they didn't have money to this time pay a producer.
Yeah. So Neil Bogart decided to step
Neil
up.
Bogart decides he's going to produce this thing himself. Now, what kind of production credit Neil Bogart had to trade on, I would suspect was I own the record company.
Yeah.
And you're just gonna do what I said.
Yeah, and according to lore, if it is to believe, he spent most of it really, really high.
Of course. So
So I don't know to what degree he was producing this, or to how that came about, versus how much they were self-producing at this point.
considering the production quality of the record too, it's kind of curious. I'm curious to where that dynamic kind of stopped and ended too.
That's a lot of question marks there. I think they were in Electric Lady again, weren't they not?
Yeah.
They were.
Well, actually, again, this would be the first time for an album.
Yeah.
They did their demo in Electric Lady, but
And looking through here real quick on Neil Bogart's Wikipedia page, I'm not seeing any producer stuff. I'm seeing a lot about Casablanca,
that's
finding
my
records.
point.
Exactly,
Is
just
this
backing
point,
you up on that.
And none of the engineers on the record are like noted for really much anything. I mean, it's just I don't have the names written down, but there wasn't any link to any of the engineers' work or anything like that
I
either.
don't know you know what? I should have had that written down in front of me, and I don't.
Point being,
And you know what? And Ken, go ahead with your
I was
point
going to say,
being.
point being, Paul and Gene might have been more involved with this than they're willing to admit, or
I'm sure
I think they would want to
they
admit.
would cop the claim if they. But it's hard to say.
But you don't hear a whole lot about that with this record.
But they go into this record, and it's what's interesting to me about it is that all of the songs except one are almost exactly 2 minutes 30.
I was you led me in perfect to something I wanted to bring up. Would you consider this, in a very, very weird way, Kiss's punk rock record?
Absolutely. I always have said that this is a missing link record. If Kiss had broke up after this record, then we would be talking about it kind of as part of that run that goes from Back in the USA by the MC5 to Raw Power by the Stooges to the debut Dictators record, Go Girl Crazy,
And then Kiss.
Kiss Dressed to Kill, and the first Ramones record. There's a lineage there that I think is absolute and unavoidable. There's a line there that is consistent all the way through all those records.
I can see
now, it's not cool to claim Kiss into that lineage because of all that came after. But at that point in the game, Kiss were not considered a kiddie group yet, you know. In fact, they probably didn't have much of a consideration on any level at this point, other than they're this anomalous kind of live thing that's happening.
They kind of had a MC5 vibe where it was still kind of rough around the edges, you know.
Well, and I think but I don't think they were in as much as a lot of the early proto-punk or whatever you want to call it. I think they still didn't see themselves as being outsiders or underground, and they all still desired commercial success. You know, there was no disdain towards commercial success at this point, and this would carry over even with the Ramones or in the first wave of the punk groups, some of whom did enjoy commercial success. But at this point in the game, I think Kiss, that 2 minutes 30 thing, is very much because they're eyeballing AM radio. And seriously eyeballing, you know, we've got all these songs are potentially singles. We want to have a song that is going to make it on radio.
And I think another way we can even draw the punk rock aspect to it, which is one of the first ways I even look at it, is so the whole idea and ideology of punk rock is very DIY, doing it yourself, and, you know, damn the big corporate labeled thing, this, that, and the other. Let's honestly put in perspective what Casablanca has. So the one big thing they have to their benefit is Bill Aucoin with his TV connections. So that would be like...
I don't think that's being used a whole lot. Bill Aucoin wasn't part of Casablanca. He's completely...
But
he's not independent of it,
but his connection to the TV industry is still what helped with the Dick Clark and all that stuff early on, getting them.
Well, Neil
what would be
Bogart had
perceived
connections too, though.
What would exactly? This is all. I feel that you're just kind of helping my case. Okay. That's no different than if we knew a radio DJ and the radio DJ spun, you know, our record, you know, for a few weekends on the station.
Was Johnny Carson on TV at the time too?
Oh yeah.
So there you go.
So the way I
yeah, of course he was.
I couldn't remember what the time frame was for that, but anyway.
Whippersnapper.
So the way I kind of see it is, all right, well, punk rock bands use all the things at their disposal for their benefit. Kiss just so happened to have a record label at their disposal that's also kind of DIYing it at this point, to the where the record label manager is going, I'm going to produce your record because we can't afford anyone else to do it right now.
Well, but it was also out of necessity. I mean, it really
wasn't punk rock out of necessity.
It was taking what you had at your means of disposal and making them work for you.
And they just so happen to have a studio at their disposal, or like the pulls to do that.
Well, somebody had to come off their wallet for that, but
for the Electric Lady Studios, yeah.
But I mean,
probably Neil.
You're still cutting costs doing it themselves, producing
right.
it. So
you know, I don't know how truthful it is that they didn't have money for a producer. I'm sure that played heavily in, that was in the thought process. I think if Casablanca had wanted to come up with the money for a producer, they could have found somebody.
Yeah.
And they would when they go to the live album, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
But in this case, though, it is what it is. They're going to go in, they're going to make this thing, they're going to make it fast and cheap, and a lot of these songs haven't even been written.
Yeah, there was stuff where
they're writing it in the studio as they go along.
Yeah.
Now, this is important to note, too, just versus the Hotter Than Hell, where I said everything kind of felt disjointed. This record feels like it's the most cohesive of the three so far.
Absolutely.
This is coming into an idea where they kind of know what they can do. They know their strengths.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like this is the first real solid Kiss record so far.
Everybody's strengths are really heightened in this record,
and they're playing to those strengths. And again, but also with knowledge that we need to get some of this on radio, and you've got those 2-minute 30 songs.
And you know what? I think something else that also attributes to the 2-minute 30 songs is all of these songs have a little bit more giddy up to them than the previous two records.
Yeah, they don't. The other, that was something.
It's not so dark.
You wonder if it's coming from the Richie Wise thing of slow it down. You know, for whatever reason, he wanted a particular tempo.
Yeah.
And here it doesn't feel like they're held to that as much. They're kind of free reined, and yeah, it's got a charge to it. I don't know. Do we just want to do this song by song as we go along here, or?
Yeah, we might as well, because again, like, as we were kind of mentioning, you know, when we're going through these early records, you know, trying to talk tour and everything else is going to be a little difficult because they were just kind of constantly on the road.
It's such a blur, but you know, you see also, I think a lot of the energy off this is fed off the fact that they are constantly touring. They are used to playing, you know, at a particular kind of speed every night. Everything is moving in a, you know, it's kind of
it's already kind of a machine at this point.
It's almost rolling under the weight of its own inertia or whatever.
And
so,
it really also feels like they're writing from what they know from this whole last year, and it's even exemplified in the first track, which is Room Service, both written and sung by Mr. Paul Stanley.
Yeah, now all the lyrics are kind of celebrating the lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, it's this point. I mean, what do you sing about? You sing about what you know, and all they've known for this last year is just being on the road. So, I mean, when you start looking at almost all of these songs, they really do kind of have a being on the road aspect to it.
Yeah, there's a lot more reflection of that kind of lifestyle. I think it's interesting to note the lyric in Room Service as being from an era where you could get away with stuff in saying stuff that you could not do today. It would be very, very, very condemned.
Oh, yeah.
You're singing, you know, and this would be true all the way through the 70s, but it was true of the lifestyle of a rock star in that era, and it wasn't just Kiss.
It was everybody.
It was everybody, and, you know, and
everybody wrote albums like this.
And the groupie set at the time, the girls that were coming to see these bands and how shall we say, servicing these bands.
So we
room service.
Room service. There you
style. They were very often of questionable age.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's even reflected in this song when he talks about, I see her dad,
he's getting mad.
You know, Sweet 16, looking hot and neat.
Yeah.
This was not unusual, you know, the groupies
and they
in that
revisited
era,
it again in a few records.
So there was a moment there where they had a magazine that was dedicated to these rock groupies, and they had their own names.
They were communities, and they had bands after a minute too.
They were famous for being who they were. Sable Starr and Lori Lightning.
See,
of course.
Pamela DeBar.
She was already kind of out of the scene by this point.
Really?
She'd married Michael DeBar, and I think, you know, whatever. She was kind of the queen, but, you know, she's written so many great books that kind of document this, and they're really worth seeking out. Her book is, I'm With the Band, is one of the best rock books ever written. It's such a great book.
That's how I know, sort of know about that culture, was like through her, really, because she has been so vocal about it. She was looking at this current crop of these teenagers coming in as, like, you know, the enemy at the time. She was not a fan, and the fact that these guys were going for it, and she was offended by it, you know, because she was 21. She felt like an old maid at 21. I'm like, what, you know? Essentially Penny Lane and Almost Famous.
Yeah, but these girls were young, and it was, you know, there was the ones that kind of had names, and then there were 1,000 more that you never heard of. But obviously they were an important quotient on the road, and Room Service celebrates that in a very explicit way.
Yeah.
One of my favorite tracks on the record, though. It's got a good pace to it. I like the tempo. I like the little breaks in it. It's got a good Paul vocal. Just say that, I need some more, you know, stuff like that. I dig it.
Kind of got that Chuck Berry riff in it.
I'll use this opportunity to talk about Paul's vocal style right now. I prefer Paul's vocal style in the 70s, and it seems like at some point in the 80s he got some sort of vocal training and decided that he could do whatever.
Bon Jovi.
Bon Jovi.
all that crap. I've never liked that
Yeah.
I don't like,
You don't like
I
the Folgers commercial where he sings about putting Folgers in your cup?
I don't like any. I'm like, I think it hurt him. I think he had a real cool, raw rock and roll vocal style that all through the 70s, before he got any kind of formal training or whatever. I think that lends to all great rock and roll, is that, it's steeped more in a folk tradition, that it doesn't matter how good of a vocalist you are,
It's an attitude.
Paul was very much an influence. You can tell, I would say probably primarily from, Steve Marriott from Humble Pie.
Yeah.
I think that was a giant influence on him.
Steve
how
Marriott
conscious he is of it himself, I don't know. I know he's acknowledged it, but I see that, and certainly Paul Stanley was not a Steve Marriott, and that's not an insult to Paul Stanley, because who the fuck is Steve Marriott? That guy was
He was a beast.
Unbelievable.
But he had like a blues thing going on with him.
That guy was some whole nother thing. But to aspire to that, or to be influenced by that, that's a good influence to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gave Paul kind of he had kind of a snottiness in his vocal that he lost later on. And I think that's speaking of snot, I think I just spit some snot out of my mouth here.
Anyway, that's what a popper stopper's for.
Where the hell did that come from? So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in for the audience to enjoy.
No, but I agree. There's definitely a little bit of sass to Paul's vocal delivery all over this album.
And that's what that sassy kind of raw, it's like it's making up for the fact that maybe he's not a quote unquote great vocalist, but that's what makes it great.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people lose sight on that. It's like what I talked about in the last episode about this sort of academic kind of idea. It's kind of steeped in this, European tradition that you must be a great instrumentalist and a great vocalist. Be a master of your craft and a virtuosic. And I'm like, there's a point where rock and roll is just like, fuck all that, we're just gonna fucking rock, man. This is what, and that's where Kiss is working so strongly, particularly at this point. I think we're at the apex of what they would ever be. I think when they're still raw, hungry, exciting, they're just, it's piss and vinegar, it's snotty, the attitude is a little bit like, we're with Sweet 16. Yes, that's what we are,
Yeah.
And it's unapologetic, and it's rock
genuine.
and roll. It's genuine, and it's as strong and as gutsy and cool as it's ever probably going to be. But that we'll explore more as we get along. But
and I would agree, because I 100% echo everything you said, because kind of reviewing this record again, I think this one and his vocal on Rock Bottom are probably his best vocals of the first three records.
Rock Bottom is such a great song too.
Oh yeah, we'll get there. So room service for everyone. How do we feel on that?
It's
a great
song.
one.
Of course, it's great.
All right, excellent. Moving on, we've got the Simmons written and sang two-timer.
Not so great.
I was gonna say going from huge highs to immediate huge lows for me.
I disagree. I like the song, and I'll tell you why. It goes into that kind of teenage attitude. And what's ironic about it is that Gene Simmons is talking about an experience that, I would relate it to a kind of a 60s greaser experience, the American Graffiti car thing. And that's something that even I didn't participate in, but I know it exists, and it existed as recently as I was a kid.
Yeah.
I'm sure it exists to some degree today. But, that whole line about, she says she loves the fast cars, and she says she loves mine the best,
See, I thought that was an innuendo.
Really? I never did.
I always thought that she likes fast cars, says she likes mine the best.
It might be, but I always took it
She
as being
can
literal.
forget the
And maybe I'm
rest.
stupid, but I just always read it as a literal thing, that it was just that it's a teenage thing. It's like,
very well could be.
your calling card as a teenager might be the fact that you've got a boss car.
Oh, yeah.
This whole album reeks of Detroit to me. This is their Detroit proto-punk record. And
I see that. I can see that.
This is part of what makes, this is my, it's neck and neck. It's one of my two favorite Kiss albums.
I don't think you're wrong. Now that I'm kind of taking it more in the literal aspect, and then after you said Detroit vibe, I really do kind of catch. I see what you're saying now.
Well, it might have a double entendre to it, and that's fair. But I just think that this song is just about it's a teenage idea, and I think it's it's intended to be a teenage idea.
I think my problem with this is like your problem with Hotter Than Hell. So like the lyrics were kind of teenagery, so yeah, that's fine. The riff is just so boring, and it's just it plods too hard.
I can hear you say that.
That fake live version that was on "You Want the Best, You Got the Best" from the '90s.
It's probably not entirely fake.
Well, the alive version. Right. I like that one because it was a little sped up and there was a little bit more like guitar work in it. Like it didn't seem so bam bam. Well,
I think they're also conscious of the time because I mean when we get done with this, you got about a 30-minute record.
Yeah,
and, you know it's
and a lot of that is eaten up by a bullshit intro and rock bottom.
Well, a lot of it on the original press was eaten up by extending the time between the songs.
Yeah, extended grooves
because they didn't.
They're like we need more space.
They're trying to mask that it's not a fully, but.
Oh, it even said at the beginning of this.
It
even said at the beginning of this there was even like they filmed some of like the run times on the back of the record, saying like certain songs were longer
than they actually were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So two-timer. At least for me personally, honestly, it might be my. It is. I looking through it. That is my least favorite track on the record.
I like the kind of the R&B style in the chorus, though. The little harmonies that are stacked up right there. I know, right? Speaking of fast cars.
Yeah, see, he makes a special guest on every one of our shows. Not maybe every episode, but every show.
Is that going to be noticeable?
Oh, yes. He's on every show at some point in time.
Well, there's no better time for him to make his appearance.
There you go.
Yeah. There we are. Yeah, and so, but Russ, you like Two-Timer.
I do. I like this whole album front to back.
Yeah, this is definitely one of my least favorite songs on the album, though.
Well, then after that, we've got another Simmons written and sang, "Ladies in Waiting."
I've always loved this song.
I think it's cool. I like this one a lot better.
It's so cool.
And it's got some of that nonsensical Gene lyric, but I mean, you know what he's talking about. You know what he means.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the entendres are not.
If it's about
clever,
if it's about a girl, then you know what it means.
It's what it is. But what's unusual about this song to me is the weird twin lead on it.
Yes, I love it though.
And then it, and then how it feeds into each other at the end. Something that I've never, it's an anomaly on versus anything they've ever done before or since. And it's. To me, it's a big hook on that song.
We were literally commenting on that today because we were jamming out that record, going and doing some errands. And as soon as that part came on, both of us immediately went quiet and just like, damn, this is such a good part of the song.
Again, on this album, there's so many great Ace moments, so many great guitar moments in general.
And they would wind up playing this live a handful of times, and you would think they would have figured out a way for Paul and Ace to do that together.
I know, right?
But they don't, and it doesn't quite hit quite the same way. But I don't see this as being a potential single, and for a lot of reasons, even though it's still clocked in at 2:30 somewhere in there,
2:35.
So they're still working in that framework, but this is just a good solid hard rock song. It's got that same kind of, like you said, that kind of snotty vibe to it, and it's leering and it's crude and it's boorish and anything bad you want to say about it, but guess what? All that bad makes for a really fucking great song. Mm-hmm. If it weren't all that bad, then you would not have the greatness that it is. So, sometimes it's got to be doubled down on its own badness.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think I can say anything else other than that. That's fucking beautiful.
That's what I'm saying.
What do you think of Ladies in Waiting, Cap?
That's one of my favorites, too. I'm looking at the track listing right now. As far as it being in my top three, probably not my top three, but it's definitely a great track.
Yeah, I like this one. For everything Russ said, I think it's a better Two-Timer. I think it's the same kind of vibe and mental attitude as Two-Timer, but just better delivered. I like it a lot better.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a good point.
And then next track, written by Ace Frehley, sang by Peter Criss. Definitely a deep cut in my opinion, but one that doesn't get enough love. Getaway.
This is a great song.
I love this one too. This one might be in my top three.
And one of the few songs on the record that was actually played in standard tuning. Every so often they'll mess with you and play a song in standard tuning because most of the time they're in E-flat tuning.
Yeah, they're usually half step down, right?
Yeah, so usually they're in an E-flat tuning. This is one of the few, if I'm remembering correctly, because it was one of the few I could actually figure out on guitar, and I remember being on the dots.
See, I did not know that. That's an interesting thing to note because there's also, this is another one of those very unkiss-like songs to me. It sounds. This is what you called the outlier or whatever. This is
Deep cut, at least.
It makes it. It's an unusual kind of song. It's not like anything Ace Frehley had written or would ever write again. Really,
no song that he writes is kind of in line with anything.
I would almost maybe. I don't know if I'm doing it only because of lyrical content. I would almost pair this next to Speeding Back to My Baby. Like I said, I don't know if I'm doing it because of lyrics.
No, yeah, there's a style there I could see, but
that kind of chuggy, I don't know, but it's still a little different. You're right.
But I tell you that it's still a great song here, and I'll tell you the secret weapon in this is Gene's playing on this, the bass line.
Oh yeah, boom, 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 boom.
See, I keep seeing that it was Ace that tracked the bass on it.
See, I don't.
That sounds so Gene.
That sounds like a Gene riff or bass playing to me, and I
love that little line too.
Yeah, it's really inventive and really clever, and it's kind of the last time you will see Gene doing stuff like this, because as they move on into other albums and stuff, that kind of inventiveness and creativity, those walking bass lines start slowly evaporating from his style, and I don't know why.
I think it's just because he wasn't engaged with it anymore.
That's a possibility, but it just seems like to me it's like, it's unlike anything else that they would later do.
Yeah,
and I think that it really opens up that song, and it's such a subtle thing. I mean, it's really, unless you're consciously locked into it, you could listen to it a million times, and until someone pointed it out, you might not notice it. Mm-hmm. Which is part of its strength, is that it doesn't it's not overbearing or whatever. It's just such a clever little thing that he's got rolling underneath it.
Oh yeah,
and it opens up the whole song.
Mm-hmm. Especially that little low, little bouncy little line that he does.
It's.
And if Ace did play it, it's great. It sounds like a Gene thing, but that just feels so Gene.
It does still feel like Gene.
But hey,
it's a great song anyway. Ace wrote it, and and Peter does a great. I mean, who else but Peter could sing that?
No one.
Again,
Gene wouldn't have sang that. Paul wouldn't have sang that well.
The other great strength Kiss had that they didn't utilize enough and encourage enough, and it makes me mad that I see Paul denigrate it so much, is Peter Criss and Peter Criss's voice.
He couldn't hold a tune in a bucket.
Well, then why don't you help him with that?
Yeah.
Rather than
you're such a good singer.
Rather than drown him in that bucket, why don't you fucking help him? I mean,
when you're on those long car rides, why don't you work with them and go, hey, sing some harmonies with me.
Encourage the guy to develop more. And but of course they were hogging the spotlight for themselves, which is understandable. They're a lot, but I don't think at this point they're allowing their egos to eclipse anything. I think
not yet.
Yeah,
I think you're going to get there, but I mean, at this point in the game,
they don't have the money. The ego comes with the money.
But as a unit overall, each guy running as an individual, for what they do, be it their instrumental contribution as musicians, quote unquote, or as singers, is all strong.
Especially on this one with Ace's solo.
Yeah. I'm still on Peter, though.
Yes,
I'm just saying, Peter's very underrated what he does here. He's a great rock and roll drummer. Mm-hmm. Is he a technically proficient drummer or whatever? We've talked about this before, and maybe not. I don't. You know what? I don't care.
But he plays that groove.
He's got that swing,
yes.
and he's got a swing that a lot of drummers didn't have. Mm-hmm. Certainly, the drummers after him didn't have, and that was their detriment. It doesn't matter how proficient they were; they couldn't bring that swing to what Peter brought. Mm-hmm. And Peter also played with a manic energy in this period that was a lot more exciting. Well, whatever got him there, it worked.
I never hated his singing voice either. You talk about that Detroit rock sound. I think his singing voice definitely lent to that.
And it plays so much into that, where that influence seems to be coming in, where they've got that kind of angular R&B kind of influence that they don't readily acknowledge. And I don't even know how aware of it themselves are, because when you're getting influenced by stuff, it's not always a conscious influence.
No.
So, I'd argue the chorus of Two Timers R&B as hell.
Yeah, I mean, there's you see it coming in different ways, but Getaway especially. I mean, Getaway has a very, very strong R&B kind of vibe, and it's a very street kind of song. And
I love Peter's outro vocals on this. Anytime he starts getting all screamy, like with this, wow, baby, yeah, I'm like, fuck yeah, get it, buddy.
So we gotta give Peter Criss the accolades that others won't give him, because
it's
he
well-deserved.
is well deserved, and he
Absolutely.
is so vital and so important to this band, and it cannot be understated or ignored, or
No matter how much
worse.
wants to be rewritten.
Yeah, you can't write him out of this. This is very key, and this song proves it.
Absolutely, man. And again, Ace's solo on this is just manic and noisy. It's just, again, what you were saying, everyone's just firing in all cylinders at this point. It feels like the first legit Kiss record at this point. This is Kiss.
Yeah, they're finally kind of getting zeroed in and tightened down into who it is and what they are.
And then for the first time on a Kiss record, we hear acoustic guitars for the intro of Rock Bottom.
Okay, let's just talk about this in and of itself.
Yes.
Yes.
Because I know people have very strong opinions on this. You just expressed it.
I've seen
It's just too long.
I've seen comment threads over this that
Okay.
have been extensive.
All right, what's your opinion?
I don't hate it, but it doesn't fit the song.
It doesn't need to fit the song.
It just... You don't say... Okay, explain then. It doesn't need to fit the song.
I think...
Well, I think it fits, but they needed to do the timing like they did on Kiss Unplugged. They trimmed out 3/4 of it. They played the important little riff and then let it drown out, and then they kicked it in. It just wasn't as
could
repetitive.
have been, this could have been dropped in where Love Theme from Kiss was... Because it's still better than that.
I mean, yeah.
And I gotta say, as long as it is, it could go on for another 2 minutes, and I would love it just as much.
Really?
I have always loved this intro part.
Really?
I just there's
It could have done the Led Zeppelin thing where it could have been its own track.
it's got this sort of melancholic eeriness to it, and it's
Now, see, I wish they had done that. What Cap said, made it a whole separate track.
it could have
Because
been its own separate track.
By the time they kick into it, oh my God! Number one, shortest Kiss song in their entire catalog. By the time it kicks
well,
in,
that's the reason why this is tacked on.
and number two, one of the coolest songs. It gets right to the point. It starts with just one guitar and drums, and then a bass kicks in, and then another guitar kicks in.
This is a balls out song, and
Oh my God, yeah.
Big vocals and everything.
Now, what's interesting about this version versus what would come on the live album later, which we'll get to, is the addition of a lead break in the middle of it, but which could have been here in lieu of this intro. You could say. That's all hindsight, but and like you said, it could have stood alone as its own track.
Yeah.
How would that have been received? Who knows? But I
Would
like
give them
this
another
intro.
track on the record.
It would give them, it would give them another track. Yeah, but who knows what the thought process was going into this? But
Yeah.
it leads into Rock Bottom. I think we all agree Rock Bottom is
Rules. It's in my top three.
It's such a great song.
It's such a ripper.
That hasn't survived into today's set. Through the history of the band is kind of a surprise to me.
Even if they wanted to cut the intro, just have that kind of how bands do, they'll hold the last note of a song, have them just clicking. Sometimes,
Well,
it's bust right in.
They allegedly, the story goes that there for a minute they tried opening shows with this.
Ooh,
I haven't been with the intro and
I
everything.
don't know if they did.
They probably would just do a clean
whatever,
guitar.
but I know they did. There was a handful of shows I think where they opened the show and it didn't work for whatever reason.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I know a lot
And
of
then
it
they
always have
tried to bring it back on the reunion tour, and it didn't survive the tour.
That's a damn shame.
Unfortunately, though, that was down on Peter's play, and he wasn't
I don't
hitting
know.
that the way I've heard that song on the reunion tours. He wasn't hitting it the way he needed
Well,
to.
in this they are, and
yes.
it's a solid tune. So
Then we lift the needle, flip that bitch over, and we got "Come On and Love Me."
Such a great fucking song
Stanley
here, too.
written,
now,
sing.
here's something you made reference on the Hotter Than Hell album, thinking you're hearing acoustic. Here you can definitely hear the acoustic. It's a lot more pronounced. They're trying to beef up the sound of the guitar, and it seems like
love it.
it's cool, but I don't understand, why they would feel the need to beef up their electric sounds with it. So it seems to me that
That might be an Ace move.
I don't know.
And the
whose
reason I
move.
say
That's a
that
good
is it
question.
reappears on his solo record.
Yeah.
Think about what's on your mind.
Yeah, I know.
And stuff like that. So I think that might be an Ace move.
It's possible.
Let's layer them.
But then again, it could also as easily been a Paul idea
gonna
as
say,
well.
Very much, yeah.
But Come On and Love Me, What's that clocking in at? I can see that.
2:57.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's one of the longer ended ones.
For me, this is in my top 3. This is like most of the time, like actually when you say Dress to Kill, that's immediately the riff that comes into my head. Is that
This is in my top 5 favorite Kiss songs, period.
Really?
It's a great song. You can't deny that.
I will say though, one of the stupidest Paul lyrics ever, and it's even more like signified because Gene is backing him up. So not only is one person singing it confidently, 2 people are singing it confidently.
Which would be?
You were distant, now you're nearer.
I can feel your face
inside the mirror. That is the dumbest lyric of 70s Kiss. I gotta preface that of 70s Kiss, period. I'll put that up against anything.
That is one of my favorites.
I can feel your face inside a mirror. What the fuck does that mean?
They probably felt pretty clever when they
That's
came
what
up
I'm
with
saying.
that.
They were like, we're going to do the whole pop song thing and put a harmony on the second verse and everything.
That's Kiss's effort at being existential, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, because he threw out the Capricorn and she's a Cancer bit, and I'm like, that's clever. I like that.
Not even using the R's.
Yeah. But you were distant, now you're nearer. I can feel your face inside a mirror. Like that feels like us making fun of Paul.
Go to the fridge and get me a beer.
But I ask you this: would you really want it any other way?
No, I wouldn't.
No, but look, we've been giving so much love to these early albums. I have to throw out some sort of criticism. So if that's my one criticism for the record, there it is. That was this dumb Paul lyric.
And that was one of the singles, and I love watching the video for this because it's awkward Gene playing awkward fingerstyle bass.
Yes, this was the record we finally got promo videos.
Well, let's finish the album and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. We all agree. Come On and Love Me, fantastic. Rock and Roll, anything from My Baby. Stan Lee sang and written. The reason I say it like that is it messes me up every time it's on shuffle.
Why?
The drum intro.
Because you think it's rock and roll.
Yeah.
No, I can tell the difference between the two.
There is slight difference, yes.
But what do y'all think of this song?
We talked about this earlier. I like the song, but the double time drum part in the chorus kind of, it needs to be. It's a little too busy, I think.
It's more of a roll.
Yeah, I was going to say, the snare roll chorus, I'm not a fan of that, but the verses are fantastic. Those big open chords, the ba, 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 good Paul vocal, just the chorus dips down a little for me.
I love this song. I think this is, again, leaning in towards their bubblegum sensibility. I could hear this as being a potential single and written to be a potential single. Mm-hmm. It's got, again, there's an R&B kind of vibe running through it.
I can see that.
And, again, you can't understate that, in my opinion. I don't know how conscious of an R&B influence they were having in that moment, but it comes out, it bleeds out. I see it, especially in the Paul songs.
Yeah.
You called it the sass, and it has that kind of a sass to it. I just recently discovered a demo exists of this song.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
And which surprised me because I didn't think that they had anything going into the studio with this. My understanding was they were literally writing it, coming in every morning, go, okay, today's song is this, learn it, record it, and capturing it while they could.
I didn't run into any of the information during, my recent treks, gathering stuff for this show, but I remember in the past hearing different stuff about, like, if they had, like, a day off on tour, they would just find a local studio and cut ideas. Yeah, so maybe that's where some of that came from.
I don't know how they would have afforded much studio time. I think they had, a lot of this stuff I think is what were amateur low-end home recording kind of equipment from that era.
Very well could have been.
There's a lot of information about demos out there, and that might be something we ought to look into at some point.
That'd be a fun special episode, just a demos episode.
Because I'm not super familiar with that, but there's people that have been able to kind of figure out who's playing what on these demos, because it's not, obviously it's not the other band members on a lot of them. It's just them with whoever they got.
On a lot of Gene's early 70s demos that wound up being on the Vault, a lot of it was like the road crew that learned and like guitar techs and stuff. Well,
one of the road crew guys ended up on one of the albums, but we'll get to that. So anything for my baby, again, it's kind of got that R&B feel. It's got that kind of, it's tailor-made for radio. It was not issued as a single, as far as I'm aware of.
No, I didn't see it listed at the top for singles. We had Rock and Roll All Night and Come On and Love Me.
So there's another missed opportunity at something. But then again, I think I'll take this moment to note that Casablanca were shoestringing along their ability to even press records.
Yeah.
And so they had different pressing plants working at different times to press these records. And I think that probably was very detrimental to them being able to sell records at that point, let alone a single. So, it's hard to promote a single when you don't even have a single in a store to sell. So I think, they were in a catch-22 situation. They couldn't get radio to play Kiss, but even if they could, who was going to be able to buy the single if it wasn't readily available?
Yeah.
Because it probably wasn't as readily available as all the major label stuff, because Casablanca at this point were completely independent. Mm-hmm. And that's important to note, that Kiss are working now, like you said, almost on a DIY kind of level.
Yeah.
And they had a partnership with a record label that believed in them, but the record label was also working towards its own ends as a means of survival.
Yeah.
So Kiss were kind of on their own and trying to slog their way through it. So they probably missed opportunities that they might otherwise have. So anyway, I'll jump off the soapbox here and we'll go on to the next one.
Well, and it further, you're a master at being able, like, even your tangents even tying into the next thing. We've got a Wicked Lester track here. It just goes to show right here, they're just trying to pull anything they can to fill up this record.
Well, what they did here, though, is they took a song that was, I would say, mediocre, and turned it into something really strong.
Mm-hmm.
And
really cool.
And a little bit of a No Time to Turn history here. That's the first Kiss song I ever learned how to play, thanks to you, Russ. Because you learned how to play it, and you were like, "Oh, you know how to play any Kiss songs?" I was like, "No, I don't." And you're like, "I know how to play She," and you showed me that little da 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 da. I
learned that from your stepdad. So
yeah, well, it's like, but you were just like, I could play a Kiss song, and you started playing She. I was like, oh, it's that easy, which then falls back to our intro episode talking about it being something accessible to pick up.
For a record, I don't play it well.
But you were still, it was still something that...
But here's the thing. The only song on the record to me that it was not written with the idea of it being a single.
Yeah, 4 minutes and 8 seconds.
Yeah.
That
was the album cut.
Yeah. It's that kind of nonsensical kind of lyric, a Gene lyric.
It's like the hook is the riff. It's kind of like a Led Zeppelin thing.
I want to say, I think it was Kenny Kerner, and they heard it may not have been. I forget. Somebody was the one that recommended them changing the lyric to, she takes off her clothes, which somehow, I remember when I was a little kid, we were like,
yeah.
She does what?
They said that on a record?
So,
and this was a Gene and Stephen Cornell written.
Yeah. And I don't know what the lyric necessarily is about, but I've always kind of taken it to be like Black Diamond. It's about a prostitute.
Exactly. That's what I thought too.
I feel that, yeah.
We are a sex positive podcast.
And as to how often any of those guys ever employed a prostitute is questionable. But
Gene, maybe.
Who knows? By this point, I'm sure they weren't paying for anything.
No.
But it's still a great song. It's darker than any other Kiss song that even off of the other albums. I think this is the darkest thing they've come up with.
I was going to say, you could hear this on Hotter Than Hell, I think.
Yeah, it seems like it would have fit that song cycle stronger and Hotter Than Hell. As we talked about in the last album, it seemed kind of disjointed. This would have fit in a lot more seamlessly.
I think so.
And in this case, this song seems kind of anomalous. Like, I could see this being traded out with a Coming Home. Mm-hmm. Coming Home seems to fit this song cycle a lot stronger.
Yeah, totally. I would agree.
At that point, I don't, who knows how much thought was given to this. It was, let's just get it in and get it done.
Basically.
I will say, though, there's a part of the studio version that never gets played live.
very end part. That
it's the very end. Yeah,
they didn't on the recorded versions that you know to exist. They were going they were transitioning into the coda from Let Me Know and going into the Ace's solo spot.
I think Roundtable, we all agree She, very important to the Kiss catalog. It's a solid one on this record.
So that goes into
Love Her All I Can.
Another holdover from Wicked Lester, and completely redone, remodeled, and retooled, and improved incredibly.
I think it's great.
I love this song.
Yes.
You know what I hear though when I hear this with the vocal delivery in the verses? I hear Grand Funk or Head East, that kind of thing.
But I love that.
I do too.
I love the whole Paul and Gene kind of singing those verses at the same time, and then Paul just doing the chorus. It's pretty cool.
It's a lot stronger than the way Wicked Lester, however they had conceived it.
It was way soft. Like even their vocal delivery on the Wicked Lester one was like, "She's so easy to please, and it doesn't take money."
Yeah, it had almost like a jazz kind of bounce to it before.
It did.
This has the full-on drive to it. It's a great riff. Those fills on the back end of the song with the breaks, all of that. I mean,
and some good cowbell in the chorus.
All of it is playing to their strengths as to what they could do and what they could do really well. I'm surprised this doesn't bleed over into their live set because it's such a great song.
And the guitar parts that Ace does are so fucking good too.
That's exactly what I was going to say, man. That solo bit with the little bow, 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 bow.
When I was a lot younger, I met a guy that was going to try to play music with, and we were talking about Ace's guitar solos having a singable quality.
Yes.
That you could sing along with them. And we were talking about it, and this guy's wife was like, nerds. and so what do? We put on the Kiss song and we start singing just the lead parts. And this was the song we used, And I'm like, you can sing along with the notes. It isn't, and that's again, it goes back to what I talk about, when I talk about these virtuosic qualities in the grand European tradition, where you get these guys and they're just playing scales and notes and stuff, and it's not something you can sing along with. And it's, I feel very alienated by that. I don't feel alienated. This brings you in. It's part of the whole kind of rapturous kind of, communal whatever rock and roll has.
It's the rock and roll church with Paul Stanley the preacher.
But at the same time, simultaneously, it also bleeds down to something that's very unique and individual to you as a person, and that's what makes it kind of cool. I think it's what makes a lot of what Kiss works well at.
Oh yeah,
because it's not even so much what you share as what you have for yourself and what it means to you as an individual. And that's so important. And, and then you find you've got this little thing, it's like, you're like, I've got this little candle. And you walk in and you're like, oh, you've got one too.
Yep.
And
if we put the candles together, the flame gets bigger.
And now we've got something, But at the end of the day, I can always go home with my own candle.
Exactly.
So, this song is a very underrated, overlooked, great song. I wish they had played it live more.
In contrast to the next song,
I mean,
well, you can Rock and Roll All Night. You can say it's played out. It is what it is. It was not this version that became the hit.
No.
So that's kind of important to note.
And they tried. They released it as a single.
Of course. But they were still centering the climax of their show on Let Me Go Rock and Roll.
Yeah. Which
that was their big closer for
my opinion. I think it's a more fun closer.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree.
I mean, as fans, we can agree with that all day. But
at this point, we're all talking from hindsight.
Oh, yeah.
And having, I've kind of grown up with this. This is the first Kiss song that I can remember hearing when I was a little kid, hearing it on the radio after seeing them on TV and not really knowing what it was.
Yeah.
And my brother going, that's that band. That was where the connection was made, was with this song. Now, I don't know if it was the studio version or the live version because it was almost 50 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So, this song is important to me in a lot of different ways. Now, again, as any seasoned Kiss nerd, it's kind of like that duality where it's like,
it's our Blitzkrieg bop.
You don't want, if I never heard it again, I'd be okay. And then you go see them live, and if they didn't play it, you'd be walking out going, God damn.
Yeah, you're still sticking around for all the confetti and everything around it.
So, I mean, and I can imagine there's nobody more sick of this song than the band themselves.
Yeah.
But having said that, coming into this, this is, they're reaching for an anthemic, song that, that would put everybody's fist in the air and can pump along and sing along. Mm-hmm. And it worked. I mean, this is not an easy song to write. This kind of music is not something that just, if anyone could do it, everyone would.
Yeah.
This is something that's pretty special. As tired and wore out as it might seem now, especially in and of its moment. Mm-hmm. Who writes something like this? Slade? And this is you can tell there's a heavy Slade influence on this whole album, really. I mean, again, how conscious that is, I don't know.
I feel that at least Slade is probably one of Slade and Led Zeppelin are probably the most conscious that they are with their influences at that time.
Well, I mean, certainly Slade. I think this anthemic kind of let's, get everybody, stamp your feet and clap your boots.
Yeah.
And whatever.
Everybody get up, have some fun.
I was going to say,
what the exact quote is. I just listened to it today.
Yeah, so it's a great song. It's the perfect song to close with. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised that they didn't have a hit straight out of the chute with this, that it would take another 6 months. 6 whole months.
Oh, wow.
All they had to do,
whole other album.
All they had to do was put a fake audience and a guitar solo over it.
Well, but here it is. And, it's just, the lyrics aren't necessarily nonsensical. They make sense.
They're pretty pointed.
It's very much, again, a teenage kind of experience. Mm-hmm.
Even fun little lyrics like "You looking fancy and I like your style."
Yeah,
it's like that's
kind of
cool.
a corny lyric, but it's a cool lyric. And
best written chorus of all time, though, or one of them. I want to rock and roll all night and party every day. It's that Iggy Pop thing.
Do you not?
Yeah, exactly. Who doesn't want that?
Well, as you get older, you want to rock and roll all night and part of every day.
Yes,
you want a little bit of time to sleep, but at that point in time, you've climaxed this album with an all-time classic. And how often does anybody get to say I've written one of the all-time classic rock and roll songs?
Oh yeah. And the thing is, again, exactly what you're saying, this is coming from 3 jaded Kiss fans that every time we see those 4 faces, more than likely they're playing that song. But what I would give to hear that song again for the first time.
Yeah.
That's the true testament of it, is imagine hearing it for the first time, or imagine showing it to someone for the first time. Because I've met people that have genuinely never listened to Kiss, and I'm like, oh, they're that rock and roll all night band, and they're like, yeah, I don't know. So there's like a small pocket of people weird. That are starting to not
most
catch about
that knows that song, but I mean, that's just odd to me that someone wouldn't. But I guess we're probably getting to a generation where you've got people that aren't rock and roll fans
at all,
which is a little odd to me. But
it's like they're aware of what Kiss is.
Yeah,
but they can't make the audio connection.
Well, and I'll tell you, it's another thing that's interesting to note, and this we'll wrap up with this is a perception of what people have had of the band visually versus what they sound like sonically. Mm-hmm. And for some people, those two do not interlock. No. They can't, and I didn't initially understand that. A friend of mine made a comment about that. He was like, and then recently I saw somebody post a meme on Facebook mocking what what Kiss looks like versus what they sound like, and they used a picture Kiss looks like, and it was the clown from It. What they sound like, it was Ronald McDonald. And it was funny, but I get it, because I had the same disconnect with when I first got into Alice Cooper.
I can see that.
And I understand there was a disconnect. Now with Kiss, I can't see it or hear it any other way because I've never known any different. From the get-go, it was all the same thing. But, for some reason, that perception seems to distort with people, and they have a hard time connecting the imagery with the music. Mm-hmm. And
I did to an extent when I first got into the band. Like, I knew about them before I heard them, and when I first heard Rock and Roll All Night, the live version, It didn't sound like what I saw, but I still liked it, and it still kept me curious.
So let me ask you this, since you're one of the few at the table or that we may be able to get in contact with, what did you imagine Kiss sounding like, especially coming into it in the mid-2000s when you did, with so much other things coming at you? What did you expect them to sound like?
I expected them to scream a lot more.
Really? Even knowing that they were like a 70s band?
Yeah, that was one thing that, when I was getting into music that my parents would always say, is like, oh, I don't like that band, or I don't like him because they scream, or yada, yada, yada.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that visual kind of thing alienated people from different ends. It was people that were like, wow, that looks really cool. And then they'd hear it and they would feel it. And then there were people that hear it and go, wow, I really like this. And then the visuals would alienate them.
Yeah.
It took a lot to tie that together. And actually, we're going to run a little long here. I've got one last thing I want to discuss, because this kind of ties into the visual aids. And this is also important to the overall lack of money and everything. The album cover for this was not shot expressly as an album cover. The album cover was actually part of a series of photos that was shot for a photo feature for Cream magazine by Bob Gruen.
Okay.
Where Kiss are called upon as superheroes to stop, I think, a John Denver concert.
Okay, I've heard this story.
And so
there's a great... go ahead, sorry.
There's the pictures of them in the suits as the ordinary Clark Kent versions, and they all march into a
photo booth.
No,
a phone booth.
Phone booth, which of course kids now are like, what? A phone booth?
Phone booth?
Once upon a
we're not
time,
going to
there
do
used
this.
to be payphones on the corner that were in these freestanding booths.
This was part of Superman lore, you know?
So, and they go into the phone booth, and then they come out the other side full-blown Kiss.
Yeah, I love it. They made a photo composite of that, where they made like the photo booth exactly the same.
Center,
yeah, and it shows like just a version of Kiss walking in one side and the fully costumed walking on the other side.
And these suits they're wearing are ill-fitted, because a few of them are Bill of Coin suits.
Yeah, Peter was the only one that had a suit.
The only one that actually had a suit.
Yeah, Peter, who'd have thunk it?
and obviously Gene's is completely ill-fitted.
I love how fucking short it is on him.
Yes. But it, all of that works. It works to the end design, and it's like,
I don't think. Well, we actually saw it with they did that John Von Vardos thing in the mid 2000s where they recreated some of the Dress to Kill look, and it's like, and everyone was in a really nice suit,
tailored suit. It doesn't work the same way.
But Gene in that ill-fitting suit with that grin on his face, there's a
menace about it. Yeah, there's something that if it had been a tailor suit, it probably wouldn't have worked the same way.
No, that ill-fitting suit really did just fit. And actually, I'll make it go a little longer and also say, in my opinion, something very important that happened during this era that kind of tried to mesh the visuals with the sound a little bit more is they did the promo videos way before MTV was even a thing.
Right. Well, that was more, I think, at the time for promoting on the European market, or in places they could not yet necessarily tour. There was probably, obviously probably a multi-use kind of idea for these promo films they made.
Yeah, but just from my understanding, just anytime a band did do that, it was kind of for press kits.
But this actually still comes a little bit later on, and it'll be something that'll tie heavily into the next episode.
Okay, then we'll do it then.
Excellent.
Which, of course, is Kiss Alive. And we hope everyone joins us for this one, because it's going to be a lot to discuss on that. It'll be a very meaty subject to bite into. And we hope you're enjoying our take on everything thus far and taking this ride with us. And we hope to see you next time. So for Alex Stiff and Cap Nunn, I'm Russ Ward, and this is No Time to Turn, a Kiss Nerd podcast.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.